So right away, I'd like to say this was quite a surprising anime. I didn't expect to like it after reading up on it and watching the opening, but as it was a request to review this anime, I stuck through it and I'm happy I did. Once again, I'd like to thank Captain Blaston for the request and giving us an opportunity to give our thoughts on it. But let me warn you, Captain. You may have given us a good anime this time, but if you give me another hole to review, then you won't live to see the next video. I'll blast you in the air! Anyways, let's get into the review. But first, I'll give a quick rundown on what I thought of the anime. I would suggest watching this one, as childish as it might seem. There's a lot of darker stuff that gets brought up quite later on, and while it takes a few episodes to pick up, it's quite a different spin on your classic isekai anime. Now don't get me wrong, it has its issues, but it managed to pique my interest and I ended up finishing it for the 3 seasons it has now. Well, let's start with the story. In our regular world, there was a girl named Urano Motosu. She was a 22-year-old woman who loved reading, and I mean loved reading, to the point where she read books on every type of genre, theme, and subject. One day, there was an earthquake which toppled Urano's book collection and crushed her to death. Isn't that ironic, getting killed by the thing you love the most? With her dying breath, she wished that God would let her read many more books, which in my opinion is the dumbest wish ever, but whatever. If I had to ask God for a wish, I'd probably ask for some bitches, but I'm just a simple man, what can I say? And as a result, she was made to take over the body of a young 5-year-old girl named Mine, in a fantasy/medieval world, which, in a funny turn of events, has almost no books to be found. Stuck in this body, and with a new family, Urano, who we will now refer to as Mine, has to decide. Will she spend her days working and have no connection with books, or will she find another way to do what she loves? And so, she decides to go on a journey of discovery and swears to make her own books to fill this world with what she cares about most. Along the way, she meets new people, learns the culture, and even climbs higher in the social hierarchy. But with new inventions come skeptics, and as she grows, so do the enemies around her and her familiars. What I should mention is that Mine has what is called the Devouring. It's an illness that seems a bit rare, at least among the commoners of this world. The reason for this is mana. It wouldn't be a good isekai anime without mana, right? Well, not everyone has it. Mainly the nobles of society contain a large enough pool in order to do magic. However, there are the few exceptions, such as Mine. Now this wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for the fact that it could kill her. She has regular bouts of fever and they make it very difficult for her to do many things. Not to mention that at the beginning in this new world, she is a 5-year-old girl, so she has much less stamina as she did when she was an adult. So she can barely go anywhere until she grows older. But no matter the problem, Mine is determined to make her books and goes through the many different cultures and methods used throughout human history to make different mediums to write, draw, and eventually read. Alright, without spoiling any more of the anime, let's get into the ratings. For the story, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. While I do like the overall story throughout the 3 seasons, I do think there were some issues that I'll talk about. The first being the slow start and the impressions the anime gives off with the first few episodes in the opening. For me, the story started getting good around episode 3, which isn't bad, but with the way I watch anime, if it wasn't for the request, I'd probably have blown it off if I watched it on a whim. As for the impressions, the anime presents itself as very childish, especially with the opening, which I think is a bit of a disservice to what the story actually is. And what I mean by this is that there's a lot of dark themes within Ascendance of a Bookworm that you would never guess exist because of how lighthearted the opening is. Also, I want to mention that many things in this anime have no depth. To be specific, the overall world is hardly explained, such as the gods, the different monsters that may or may not exist, how magic works and where it comes from, etc. In terms of characters, while some are enjoyable and varied in appearance and personality, I'd have to give them a 6 out of 10. Almost all of these characters are two-dimensional, and what I mean by this is that they don't develop or have good reason for why they do things. I think this is because of the very large cast of important characters that are in the show, because the more characters you have, the less time you have to explain them fully. If the important cast was cut in half or lessened to 10, then they would have a lot of time to spend on showing that they have reasons for what they do. But of course, that would be boring if they spent an entire season on the cast that wasn't an actual main character. Mine, even though she lived to be 22 in the normal world, acts very much as a child, and even though she says that she's read many books of varying genre and subject, she seems to have almost no knowledge of anything outside of books and the history of how they were made. As for the action, it's not an action-based anime like most isekais are. As such, there's not many fights that happen other than cutting down fast-growing twigs, which are a type of plant called trombe. By the way, this is the only fantasy-type enemy/monster that is shown within 3 seasons worth. There's some short magic fights here and there. So the action really isn't anything special, so it'll get a 6 out of 10 from me. It's enough for what they need to show, but if they're gonna have some more action in the next season, then they're gonna need to bump it up a bit. The sound is about the same. It's nothing special and not much gets shown to give an opportunity to stand out. The openings, while being cute and fun to watch, I think give the wrong impressions, especially the first season opening. When I watched the opening, it looked like the anime was going to be all about cute, childish themes, and the music reflects this, which isn't necessarily bad, but within the show itself, there's a lot darker themes like I mentioned before that get presented, such as the bad parts of social hierarchies, and, unfortunately, child abuse. You could say that these themes don't get explored much because in that world they're normal, but in order for the viewer and the main character to understand what's going on around them, they need some kind of further explanation, or else they seem like plot points that were thrown in there as a half-assed attempt to attract an older audience. But how will this audience even get into the anime if the first opening, which is as good as a first impression, doesn't show it? Anyways, this section is supposed to be for sound, and while the music in the opening isn't my style, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. For what it's worth, the animation is good. I never really felt as though the animation quality dropped other than the fight scenes, but like I mentioned earlier, it's not an action-based anime, so not as much money was put into it to make it look super smooth. There's really nothing else to be said here. The openings benefit the most from the animation quality and they're fun to watch, so it'll get a 7 out of 10. Alright, so overall the anime gets a 33 out of 50. While I like the 3 seasons, it really isn't something I'd massively enjoy, mainly because of one big issue: the writing. A lot of the parts of this show suffer massively from the writing. Now let me say this, I have no idea if the anime fully follows the manga it was based on, but if it was, then there you go. This encompasses every part of the anime, from the characters to the overall world that they live in. I mean honestly, if you've seen the show, can you explain how magic works in this world? Where does it come from? Why does it exist? Does it come from the gods? Well then tell me, do the gods actually exist, especially if a lot of the magic is based on prayers from the gods? Or are they a ploy that the church uses to make people think that? How do you even know that you need prayers to do some magic, when maybe the gods are just a way to visualize magic? See what I mean? And you can use this questioning process for a lot of the show. And if you're thinking right now, why would we need to ask these questions? It's so we can understand the world and get invested. If they don't show more monsters or creatures that exist, how am I supposed to imagine other kinds of creatures that may exist as well and get hyped as a result? There needs to be a level of expectancy or some base rules of how things work in order to get properly invested. Otherwise, there's no point. They throw in things and ideas to fit the story at that time, rather than actually explaining many things, which in my opinion is just bad writing. Like I said, maybe they do in the manga, but I'm reviewing the anime, so that's that. I hope you can understand my point of view, and of course, there's going to be people that don't need everything to be told in order to enjoy the show, and that's fine. But if you look at anime in a similar way that I do, then you probably didn't enjoy the show too much either. But yeah, that's about it for this review. Once again, a big thanks to Captain Blastum for the suggestion, and if anyone wants us to review a specific anime, then be sure to pop it down in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Anyways, later.